This example of the liquidity ratios, the working capital and the asset test ratio, um, based on Intex Limited's liability for the 3 years, so from 2014 to 2015 to 2016. So it's great to have 3 years to be able to compare, to look at the differences from one year to the next. Is it a positive trend? Has it increased? If not, why? So based on the two liquidity ratios, remember they can be called number one, the working capital ratio, because remember you're comparing the current assets, all of them, to the current liabilities. It can also be called the current ratio because it's all about the current assets, current liabilities. So just be aware of that. The other ratio or formula is called the asset test or the quick ratio because it's quicker to see, or sorry, quicker to convert your assets to cash because you're taking out the closing stock. Um, and just to be aware that they can be called either. And remember, when we're analysing or commenting, we'll always be aware of the norms or the ideals of 2:1 for the current ratio and 1:1 for the asset test ratio. So looking at the figures here, so the current assets for this year were 120,000 divided by current liabilities 60,000. So even looking at the figures, if you have 120,000 in assets currently and 60,000 in what you owe, that's good. You have double the amount to pay back. And remember, the norm or the ideal is €2 available for every €1 that's owed. So 2:1. So that's good that year. When it goes to 2015, the current assets are higher. The current liabilities are also higher, but once it's calculated, it's 150,000 divided by 70,000. It's still above the norm or the ideal, which is good again, and it is increasing, so that's a positive trend. 2016, however, the current assets are lower, and when it's divided by 60,000, then the current liabilities, it's below the norm of €2 or 2:1. So that just means they have, for every €1 that they owe in liabilities, they only have €1.60 to pay it back. Now they can cover it, but it's still not ideal. Remember, the ideal is 2:1. So that's a negative trend, or that year is a problem. So you'd have to comment on that and why that is. The asset test ratio is very same as the working capital or current ratio. However, you're taking out the closing stock, in this case of 40,000. So it's going to be lower, but remember the norm or the ideal is 1:1. So it's still above the norm or the ideal here. And this year, it's still above the norm also, so that's good. And it's increasing, but you would expect, like with the current ratio, it has decreased and it's below the norm of 1:1. So they only have 86 cents available for every €1 that they owe, and that's not good. Okay, so 2016 is a big issue. So we're just going to finish quickly on comparing. So when you're answering this, you'd always comment on the figures, calculate, comment on the figures, the trend from one year to the next. If that's good, compare it to the norm or the ideal, like they have here. Give the figures and just give a comment on what they can do. So the working capital in 2016 is an issue, so it'll have to be monitored closely. And think about it. The problem here is they don't have enough assets to cover their liabilities, and it's really just to see why that is. So why don't they have enough cash or money in the bank to pay back any, say, outstanding bills or any creditors that they owe money to? Maybe they have a bank overdraft, so there should be more money available for that. And how they would improve that is, again, more sales and more keeping money there available. So cash flows is a problem there. And same you could mention here for the quick ratio and what that means. There's only so much available that needs to be addressed quickly. And again, what can be done is to get money in cash and bank, because it's not got to do with stock, remember, because that's taken out for the asset test or quick ratio. So it's given an action plan here to improve the liquidity. The business could take the following actions: organise payments to ensure the business has money coming in for debtors, getting more money in, because the debt, remember, is a current asset, and the money they get in, they can have in the bank or cash available to pay any debts. So credit control is very important here. If a debtor owes money and has 1 month to pay it back, make sure they're paying within that month. Reduce stock, so again, because remember that's very difficult to convert to cash, so free up cash then to be able to use. So try and get rid of some of the stock. Have cash available, so don't sell on credit. Make sure people are paying as much as possible by cash, so to keep the business operating on a day-to-day basis. And keep the overdraft down to a minimum, because that is a liability, remember. So try and keep money available to pay debts. So that's the action plan, or what they can do. I'm going to stop that video now and look at some questions in the next